Okay, now that we understand flow direction a little bit better, we're ready to take a look at exactly how it works, and I think you're going to like this. So once we've specified a parent container as a flex container, the next thing we need to determine is the flex flow direction, which establishes the direction of the main axis. In more simplified terms, all you're doing is specifying whether the child flex items that sit inside the parent should run horizontally as rows inside your layout or vertically inside your layout as columns. And as with everything Flexbox, this is super simple to go and set up. So head back into your coding application if you would. We're going to go and find our parent ID selector in our case, and here's what we're going to do with this guy. I'm going to set flex-direction just like so, :space. Now for the value that we'll set initially anyway for our flex direction, we're going to set row, okay? Followed by a semicolon, of course. Go ahead and save up your work, if you would, and head back to your browser and refresh, and you'll find that when you refresh, not a whole lot happens. Nothing changes because the default main axis or flow direction is row or horizontal. You might want to add that to your notes. So if you know you want to create a horizontal row or a horizontal structured layout, if you will, you could leave flex direction row, in other words, the code that we had just inserted, you could leave this code out since it's the default anyway. However, it's a good idea to include it because it ties into controlling content wrapping, which is something we'll get into in short order. Okay, so if you're taking notes here, row is the default. Okay, and by the way, the experimenting, the messing around that I've done with Flexbox thus far, the vast majority of the layouts that I'm building are horizontal, not vertical. However, if we wanted to, we could change the layout to be a vertical layout, perhaps for a smartphone layout. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change flex direction row to, perhaps you're one step ahead of me here, flex direction column, just like this. Go ahead and save up your work and head back to your browser and refresh once again, and now we get something like this happening. So now we're back to something very similar that we saw earlier on before we even established that we had a flex container here. We have more of a traditional HTML layout where all of our child elements are now appearing vertically as if they're inline elements, right? Which they are by default. So they're all stacked on top of one another just like that, and their heights collapse down to the height of their content too, by the way. Okay? Now, interestingly, we can reverse the order of our child flex items if we wish. Now, this opens up some really powerful layout options without having to mess around with floats or messing around with the structure of our HTML document. We can simply make some adjustments via CSS and completely control the order of our layout elements. It's super cool. Check this out. So here's what we have here, of course, 1, 2, 3, no big deal. I'm going to go back to my code here. Rather than flex direction column, I'm going to say flex direction column hyphen reverse. Save and refresh your browser and check it out. We now have something like this happening. So now we have 3, 2, 1, and notice they've been pushed down to the bottom of the parent container just like that. Perhaps this is going to be a heading inside your web layout or something like this, and you want to have perhaps a stack of buttons or something like this, right? How about setting up a row reversal? How about that? Well, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to go back to my code. I'm going to go flex direction. Rather than column reverse, I'm going to go back to the default, which is just row, which is where you and I started, something like this, right? But instead of just going row, I'm going to say row hyphen reverse. There we go. Save that and refresh. And now all of the elements have been pushed over to the opposite side of the parent container, and their order has reversed as well. 3, 2, 1, and they're all sitting over on the right-hand side instead of the left-hand side. Man, I could have used this 5 or 10 years back. Super easy to establish. And again, I haven't really gotten to this yet, but if this is being viewed on a smaller display or something, or if the layout begins to flex, as I'm showing you here, you can see that the child flex items are simply being carried along inside the layout like so, which is super awesome. And all we did is changed a simple value on a simple property. We didn't have to get into the HTML structure of the document and go and reorder any of our structural elements or anything like that. So there you go. There's setting the flow direction and a couple of cool things that you can do with reversing the flow direction.